Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our session, Tourism Futures, Adapting Outdoor Recreation and Tourism to Climate Change and Changing Visitation in Northern Wisconsin. I'd first like to thank the sponsors for today's Lake Superior regional events, the Superior Rivers Watershed Association, and the Lake Superior Collaborative. So we've got a really exciting but slightly modified lineup of panelists for our session today. But I will go ahead and introduce our first speaker, Dr. Megan Salmon-Tumis, who is an assistant professor of climate science at Northern College. Megan will be providing us with an overview of climate projections for Northern Wisconsin and the Chequamegon Bay and a summary of the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, Tourism and Outdoor Recreation report as it currently stands. Just a reminder that we're taking questions at the end of our 3 presentations, but please use the Q&A box in EventMobi to submit your questions and upvote questions you want answered. And Megan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Natalie. I am excited to be here today to share about something that I care a lot about, and also amidst a group of presenters with a rich array of perspectives. So I am Megan Salmon-Tumis, and as Natalie said, I'm an assistant professor of climate science at Northland College in Ashland, Wisconsin. And today I will share with you the expected changes in climate that will be, just a second, I'm afraid that my screen is not sharing.
We can see the slides.
Okay, great. And especially along the expected changes relevant to tourism and outdoor rec in northern Wisconsin, and especially along Lake Superior's Wisconsin shore. So much of the work I will be presenting today was done through the coordination of the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, also known as the WICI, or WICCI. The WICI is operated through the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and the University of Wisconsin Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. The mission of the WICI is to enable climate change adaptation and mitigation in Wisconsin. And to do that, WICI aims to act as the bridge between science and solutions. So the organization does not manage primary research per se, but rather it coordinates the communication of research to the community members and policymakers who need that knowledge in order to design and steer solutions. The WICI first formed in 2007, and by 2011 issued this report, Wisconsin's Changing Climate, Impact and Adaptation. After that, the WICI grew quiet for several years until 2019, when Executive Order number 52 directed the DNR to work with the WICI to update and reissue this 2011 report. WICI works through topic-specific working groups, and after that 2019 directive to update the report, some new working groups were added, including a tourism and outdoor recreation working group. The group is co-chaired by Natalie Chin and Drew Watermolen and contains 13 members today, including myself. After forming, we set our near-term goals and long-term vision, and we provided a table to the Governor's Task Force on Climate Change on tourism strategies and solutions. Now we are writing our initial assessment report. Whereas the other working groups were tasked with updating their previous reports, the Tourism and Outdoor Rec Working Group has the exciting job of creating its first assessment report. So this talk focuses mostly on the second chapter of that draft report, and it's a review of existing research. The chapter describes the expected climate changes in Wisconsin that will impact tourism and outdoor rec. And in this talk, I'll be focusing primarily on northern Wisconsin. Of course, we have probably all heard that temperatures are rising and will continue to rise. Before I get into the details of how tourism and outdoor rec will be affected by this, I want to take a moment to explain a couple of terms and considerations that are important for interpreting climate change projections. First, it matters how far into the future you're projecting. In this talk, we'll mostly be looking at changes that are expected in mid-century. Note that this time period is just 20 years away now. Second, it matters what people do. So global populations could grow more or less, consumption patterns could change or not change, policies and technologies could develop or not. Those divergent possibilities are captured through different scenarios, and each scenario tells a story about possible changes in human society that could influence climate. Portrayed here is a scenario called RCP 4.5, and that's a scenario that involves a moderate level of greenhouse gas emissions. This map was produced by the Climate Working Group of the Wiki, and it's available on the Wiki website. And it shows that throughout the state, we can expect annual average temperatures to rise by about 5 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century compared to the recent past. But notice that the shore of Lake Superior gets a slight reprieve, warming only about 4 degrees during that same period, showing that indeed it is cooler by the lake. When temperatures rise, Wisconsin will experience more days of extreme heat, whereas the northern part of the state has historically experienced 8 or less days per year that exceed 90 degrees. This map from the climate science update portion of the Wiki report to the governor's task force on climate change shows that by mid-century, this area will experience between 10 to 25 of these very hot days each year. These extreme heat days pose health risks to tourists and outdoor recreation enthusiasts, such as dehydration, heat exhaustion, and exertional heat stroke. For indoor tourism and recreation businesses, these increases in extreme heat days will bring increased energy costs to meet the cooling needs of customers and employees. These changes in temperatures will bring about changes in the timing of summer tourism and outdoor recreation activities. In other words, our expectations for when summer recreation activities occur might need to change. Shown here in green is today's current summer recreation season, when temperatures are not too hot and not too cold, but just right for outdoor activities like beach going and paddling. But later this century, when temperatures rise, shown here in orange, this will bring about a shift in the start time of these summer activities toward earlier dates. And similarly, at the end of the season, there will be a shift towards ending these activities later in the season. These season timing changes could require changes in staffing schedules at beaches and area businesses. However, in the peak of the current summer season, future temperatures are likely to become too hot for outdoor summer activities. And as a result, this midsummer time may become like a tourism and outdoor recreation donut hole, a time when visitation and usage of area outdoor amenities drops due to discomfort and safety concerns. So the example here is intended to illustrate the concept. It does not show a specific projection. And recall that in northern Wisconsin, days over 90 degrees are not expected to exceed 1 month per year by mid-century. However, this could change by late century, and how much is less certain. Winter recreation will also change, as snowpack will shorten in duration and become less reliable. These maps are from an article by Michael Notaro and others in the International Journal of Climatology, and they are projections of change in snowfall in Wisconsin. The 2 columns on the left are changes by mid-century, with the second column showing a scenario with higher greenhouse gas emissions than that of the first column. In either scenario, in northern Wisconsin, we will see on average between 4 and 8 inches less snowfall per year by mid-century compared with the recent past. This will affect snowpack throughout the winter recreation season, but the impact will be the greatest in the late season, particularly in March. Lake ice is also changing, and especially so on Lake Superior. These maps from an article by Mason and others in Climatic Change show on the left the duration of lake ice, which you can see in Chequamegon Bay was typically 2 to 3 months each year on average. And the map on the right shows the change in lake ice duration during those 40 years. We see that the decrease has been about 1.5 days each year, which translates to 2 weeks less lake ice each decade. That is a staggering change to experience. Now, this is not a projection, but these trends are expected to continue into the future. though there will likely be variability, and some high ice years are still to come. This loss of lake ice has particular impacts in the Chequamegon Bay, where the residents of Madeline Island rely on the ice road to Bayfield to provide a seasonal break from the restrictions and the cost of the ferry service. Inland lakes will also experience changes in their ice cover. Among the many impacts of less lake ice will be changes in ice fishing access and safety issues. We can't talk about changes in climate in northern Wisconsin without discussing increases in heavy rain events. These maps from the Climate Working Group show an increase from about 6 days per century of extremely heavy rain events during the recent past, moving up to about 10 days per century by the mid-century. These heavy rain events threaten our infrastructure, including campgrounds and trails, and even the roadways that tourists rely on. Recreation infrastructure is often sited near water, making it particularly vulnerable to flooding. There is an array of other relevant impacts to tourism and outdoor recreation, and I'm going to skip past these for now and move on to the economic changes in the sake of time, but we can discuss it more after my presentation if you'd like. Tourism and outdoor rec businesses could be faced with increased expenses from insurance costs and emergency preparedness needs, such as backup water supplies and backup electricity supplies. And they may face shifts in customer habits due to changes in destination preference and preferred modes of transportation. While some sources suggest that travelers will stay closer to home with changing climate, others argue that they will show stronger preferences for high latitude destinations. In northern Wisconsin, we could benefit from increased visitation if we're well prepared for these shifts. With these climate change impacts in mind, the working group is continuing its work on the assessment report, detailing the climate change interactions and adaptation options for specific tourism and outdoor rec activities. Meanwhile, we're working to engage with tourism and outdoor rec stakeholders for ongoing feedback on the report to ensure its relevance and usefulness for the sector. I'd love to talk more about the efforts of the working group or my own research in this area, and my contact information is near the bottom of the slide here, and feel free to email me about it. I'd like to conclude with giving thanks to the members of the Wiki Tourism and Outdoor Rec Working Group, especially Natalie Chin and Phil Reinish, who've contributed ideas to this talk, and to Shruti Sarodi, who provided some background details to this talk about the Wiki, and especially to you. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to questions and comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan, for that wonderful presentation. And a reminder that we will take questions at the end, so please remember to type those into the Q&A section in Event Mobi and continue to upvote questions that you'd like answered. So our next team of presenters join us from the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. They are Kristen Schmidt and Dr. Leslie Brandt, and they'll be sharing with us an overview of their outdoor recreation menu. And I'll turn it over to Kristen.
All right, thanks so much, Natalie. And please just chime in if you are not seeing my slides or if anything looks weird. So thanks so much to all of you for attending today, and thanks for inviting us to be on this panel. Myself, Kristen, and Leslie Brandt are going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that we've developed to help people make decisions about outdoor recreation under climate change. Both Leslie and I work for the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, or NIACS, and really the focus of our organization is on helping decision makers in natural resources incorporate climate science and carbon science into their management decisions. And we do that by working with a variety of people. You can see all the logos at the bottom. These are all representative of our charter members. So we work with anyone really interested in science-based climate adaptation. And the tool we're going to talk about today was created really to answer this question. How are we going to adapt our recreation infrastructure and our services to climate change and to some of the effects that Megan just talked about in her presentation? The tool that we put together to help people answer some of these questions, we call a climate change adaptation menu. So a menu is really exactly what it sounds like. It is a collection, a list of different types of actions that we call strategies and approaches that people can pick and choose from based on the area where they're working, based on their project, their location and context. So it's the tool to help people make decisions about how they want to adapt their recreation. The recreation menu is one of about 10 published menus at this point, with several more in development. So this is a type of tool that we've developed for other focal areas of natural resources, other types of focus areas. So our original menu, published back in 2012, focused on forest systems in the Midwest and Northeast. And then this recreation menu actually takes a much broader geographical view. It is applicable across the continental United States. So a little bit of a different focus there. And the menus are really meant to be used in conjunction with a decision-making process. And the one that we use with a lot of our audiences and our partners is known as the Adaptation Workbook. So this is really just a 5-step decision-making process that helps people deliberately incorporate climate change and climate change risks and impacts into that decision. And these menus come in here in step 4, as you can see, when it comes time to identify adaptation actions or tactics. And so I'm going to turn it over to Leslie now to talk more specifically about the strategies in the recreation menu.
Thanks, Kristen. So the menu is arranged on a continuum where the first few strategies really focus on protecting our recreation resources, what we call resistance-oriented strategies. In the middle, we have some strategies that are more focused on being more flexible and resilient to changes. So maybe adjusting our communication strategies and helping to communicate risk as a part of building more resilience and bouncing back after a disturbance. And then finally, the last 2 strategies really focus on transitioning our recreation activities and resources and locations of those activities to align with future climate conditions. I'm going to walk through a few examples of how the menu works. So the first example, this is the Superior Hiking Trail in Northeast Minnesota. The people that were managing the Superior Hiking Trail were really interested in how climate change was going to affect hiking opportunities, specifically because we would have a longer season, but that we might have more heavy rain events, which could result in mud and erosion, but also potentially increase visitor use. So as people are moving into those higher latitude areas to escape the heat, we might see more activity. And so the folks that were thinking through this exercise first started by identifying a strategy that really fit in with addressing their concerns, and that was to manage impacts from shifting visitation and use trends. Under that, there are several specific approaches that are lined out in the menu that align with that broader strategy. So the one that they honed in on was this approach on redirecting visitor access away from at-risk areas. And the specific tactics that they developed were to use soft closures and redirecting use during poor conditions. So when you have a lot of erosion or mud, you might use that tactic. And then also providing area alternatives to spread out visitor impact to reduce impacts on that particular area. The next example I'll share with you is about public access viewing along the Lake Superior shore. So here the concern was increased severity and frequency of extreme weather events, particularly heavy rain events and wind, and then health and safety concerns for visitors associated with that along the shoreline. So here, the strategy that really aligned with addressing those concerns was to account for and communicate risks to health and safety. And under that, the particular approach was to improve public awareness regarding climate change and climate-induced risks. And then the specific tactics that they developed were to develop new partnerships with lodging and rental equipment companies on visitor education, so to communicate those risks that way, and then also to increase emergency alert systems to reach the public for messaging. We are offering a course coming up very soon. Applications are currently open that will allow you to use this recreation menu and develop your own adaptation tactics. This will be offered April 5th through May 24th and is a virtual learning opportunity free of charge. And we will walk you through that adaptation workbook in an online version. And you will have opportunities to interact with folks like me and Kristen and other colleagues at NIAX to develop a real world adaptation project. So if you're interested in applying, you can check out our website, forestadaptation.org. And if you're interested in finding out more information about our recreation-oriented adaptation trainings, or to download a copy of the recreation adaptation menu, you can go to our focus page on recreation on our forestadaptation.org website. And there you will find a link to download the rec menu. And if you have any questions or want to reach out to us about any recreation-oriented adaptation planning, both Kristen and I are happy to work with you, and our contact is available here.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie and Kristen, for that really great presentation. So our final speaker for today is Mary Motiff, who is Bayfield County Tourism Director and Mayor of Washburn. And we've asked Mary to highlight some of the work that Bayfield County Tourism and the city of Washburn are doing that consider climate change. And again, please remember to type any questions that you have into the Q&A section of EventMobi and upvote any questions that you'd like answered. And Mary, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Natalie. Good morning from the shore of Lake Superior, everyone. I am going to just share my screen here, so give me a sec. Great. So climate change has been on my radar. Oh, sorry, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, perfect. Climate change has been on my radar since I was in college back in the late 80s and early 90s. I have a degree in zoology and environmental studies, which from UW-Madison, which actually combines well with my role as tourism director for Bayfield County. Excuse me. You know, out of any place to have those things combined, this is a really great place for that. And I really hadn't seen many direct examples of how climate change affects tourism until the summer of 2018. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about that experience today. So it was June 16th, Father's Day weekend. I was at the Big Top Chautauqua watching a Brandi Carlisle concert, and I was there with the Northwest Regional Tourism Specialist from the Wisconsin Department of Tourism. I was showing her around the area and having her experience some of the things that make this area special. And so there we were, and all of a sudden a storm moved in. And it was a really bad storm. And actually they had to cancel the end of the concert and send everyone home because it was getting so bad. And I don't know if that has ever happened before at the Big Top. So it was a big storm. And of course, my colleague was staying in a treehouse that night up in Bayfield. And so that she had a very interesting night at the treehouse that night. And overnight, it just got worse and worse. And it ended up being a huge flood. And we had, in the morning, a group got called together and our emergency operations center here at Bayfield County was activated. And so I got pulled in as part of a team to communicate, assess and communicate with the public about the flood and all the roads that had been washed out and how we could tell people how they could get home. You know, our weekends are quite busy here in the summertime, and all of a sudden I realized that my colleague was stranded in a treehouse in Bayfield, you know, and I had to communicate that to her as well as to everyone else who was here from out of the area. And so we worked on putting information together and getting it out on the county's website. And this really ties in well with the previous presentation because we had recently switched to a new website that allowed us to do alerts across the top of our website. That, you know, was one of many ways that helped us communicate with the public about this. And so we put together information, including a road closure map, so that we could share that out and communicate with the public which roads were closed. So here is an example of what that map looked like a little bit. So you could zoom in and then as you zoomed in, you could actually see places where incidents had occurred, and then a lot of photos were taken and added in as well. So, you know, we had Highway 2, literally a section of Highway 2, which is a federal highway, washed out. This is the river that just completely blew out the highway, and that happened overnight, which was quite dangerous. And then just here's another example of the flooding that occurred. This is the entrance to the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center here off of Highway 2 further to the east. So it was really, it was like 100-year flood, but this was like the third or fourth 100-year flood in the past 100 years. And so we realized that this is something that is becoming more common to have this sort of activity affect not only, you know, just people in general, but tourism in particular. And here in Bayfield County, tourism accounts for over 25% of our economy is supported by tourism. And so it's Bayfield County, just a little background, second biggest county in the state, and half of our land is in public ownership. And so we really rely on utilizing those public lands for outdoor recreation in order to, you know, make the most of our tourism economy. And then not only does that bring money into our area from people coming here and spending money while they're visiting, but people also get exposed to the area and fall in love with it. And some of them actually end up moving here. And so there's the summary of that event and how that really has a direct effect on tourism. And like I said, it really is one of those specific examples of what they were just talking about in the previous presentation, a real life example of how we had to deal with an effect of a flood due to climate change in real time. So I would love to connect with some of these presenters afterwards. So that's the only story I really wanted to tell. And initially I was just going to be here to answer questions. So I think with that, I will turn it back over so that we can just get to the question and answers.
Great, thank you so much, Mary. Those pictures are pretty astounding. I wasn't in the area yet in 2018, so I hadn't seen many of those, but yeah, wow, incredible. So we do have a few audience questions, and please continue to type those into the Event Mobi Q&A section. Before we jump into that, Mary, I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about this past summer. and how the COVID-19 pandemic has kind of created an, I'd say, unexpected influx of visitation to the region, and how might that continued increased visitation impact the community. And I think that ties back to Megan's presentation, where she said that we might actually see more tourism in this area as a result of climate change.
Sure, and actually that is quite true. We did see an influx of people to the area despite the pandemic, because outdoor recreation is so abundant up here, and we literally just have the space for people to feel like they could come and spread out and be safe. We had quite a busy summer season and fall as well, until it started getting cold. It was unbelievable, actually. A lot of people were saying that it was busier than Apple Festival, which for us is a huge tourism weekend up here. And they were seeing multiple weekends, busier than the 4th of July and busier than Apple Festival. And our campgrounds were packed. Camping was hugely popular. Bayfield County owns a few yurts that are rented out through Airbnb. 2 of them are up at Mount Asho Bay and one is down in Cable, and those were just booked constantly. And people, I think people were a little leery of hotels still, I think, early on in the pandemic. And so they maybe didn't see as big of an influx at those facilities. But we have lots of independently owned and managed cabins and cottages and rental homes. And a lot of times campgrounds will also have cabins, and resorts will have cabins and condos and things like that. So it was extremely busy. It was, I've never seen it that busy here in town. And so I think that does bode well for the future. And I have statistics of how many people request information from us. And just looking at those statistics, everything is increased. When I look at 2020 as a whole compared to 2019, everything has increased, and especially the outdoor activities, the hiking and ATVing and snowmobiling, as well as orchards and those sorts of things. So, and then again, this year to date, up until or for the first 2 months of the year anyway, I compared to last year at this time, and we're up again more this year compared to last year. So I just think that that's going to continue, and outdoor recreation is going to honestly be our savior in some ways. And I see people moving here. I've seen couples in the hallway here that are looking at information because they're here doing business at the courthouse because they've just purchased property, or they're building on property, or doing something at the Register of Deeds office. And I actually connected someone with a local snowplower because they were only going to live here part-time, and they needed someone here to keep their new driveway plowed. We have really good broadband, which really helps. We took advantage of that the last time we had a recession, and some of our one of our local companies, Norvado, added fiber to the home to all of these areas that are literally in the middle of nowhere, through the national forest and beyond. And so, this couple had bought a home in Herbster, and they were going to live there part-time, and they had fiber to the home, so they could do that, and they could work remotely quite easily from that location. So with those things coming together, we're really in a good place to address those. I think the state has also seen that outdoor recreation is really an important part of what people want in tourism, and they actually created an Office of Outdoor Recreation at the state level now that's part of the Department of Tourism. And I want to say that that was made permanent, but I can't say that for sure. So lots of good research is happening through that department, and I think they're still finding their way a little bit in terms of what the needs are, but there's so much outdoor recreation in Wisconsin that they have a big task ahead of them. But yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, and they just Headwaters Economics, I think it was, just put out a really great report about outdoor recreation in Wisconsin if folks are more interested in some of the research. So let's see, we have a question for Kristen and Leslie, and I don't know if anything that Mary mentioned maybe is also included in the outdoor recreation menu, but the question is, can you talk a little bit more about who might benefit from the recreation adaptation course?
Sure. The course is really designed for folks who are managing outdoor recreation resources. So if you are working for the Department of Natural Resources or a county park or municipal park or federal lands where there is a recreation component like a campground, picnic sites, it could be other things like shorelines. Really where somebody's really tasked with managing that land and making decisions about, how we can offer recreation opportunities on those sites in the future.
And Natalie, just to add quickly to your point about increased visitation, I'd say that, some of those ideas can be approached with the menu. There is a strategy that deals with, how do you develop tactics that can handle the shift in visitation? So I think, something Megan said in her presentation was spot on, that increased visitation can really benefit us if we're well prepared for it. And I think, we saw a lot of examples this summer of where we were well prepared to deal with that and maybe a little bit less so and there was more impact. So thinking through some of those things, I think will be important for climate change as well.
If I could just add to that, I would also like to see destination marketing organizations be an audience for that course. I think that would be a great audience because I think we need to connect these two pieces. The logistics along with the promotion to make sure that those two parts are working together.
Great, thank you for that. I think this links perfectly into a next question for Megan, and it's about the donut hole, and it's kind of understanding how much the seasons are going to shift, if that's possible to quantify. Is it days, weeks, or months? And then kind of a follow-up question to that, is there any data or projections on how these shifts may affect in-migration to the area?
Thanks. Yeah, I think that it's a really excellent question. And it's actually one that we're working on in the Tourism and Outdoor Rec Wiki working group, because we really want to provide in the report specifics about what can be expected in the different seasons and those seasonal shifts. So we've reached out to the climate working group and we've obtained the climate projections for different periods in time, mid-century and late century, and for different scenarios, high emissions and moderate emissions scenarios. And I'm working on processing those in order to find things like, how likely is it in different months of the year to get days that are ideal for those summer activities, like 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. But I don't yet have results from those analyses to share to answer exactly what that question is, but it's definitely an important one that we're hoping to include in the report. I think probably in the near term, we're talking about days to weeks change, not months change. But by late century, if we're seeing high emissions, it could be a different story. As far as in-migration goes, I hear a lot of buzz about this. I don't know about the science behind it. I haven't seen the evidence myself yet, but I also haven't dug into it as one of my own research questions. So I'd be curious to hear if anybody else has ideas.
I'll just say that one thing that we always rely on is the fact that Lake Superior is kind of like a giant air conditioner. And so people are more comfortable when they're coming up here and able to spend time close to the lake. And I think that's going to be to our benefit as those days get warmer in the summer. And then in the winter, we get lake effect snow that helps skiing in the area, of course. And that'll, again, I'm a silver lining kind of person. So I'm always looking for the benefits, that we can grab onto as we adjust to these.
Great, thanks. Um, this question, and feel free, any of you who want to jump in, but someone is asking about how we communicate what things like 100-year flood means to the public. So it seems like people believe that a 100-year flood means a flood that happens every 100 years rather than a flood that has a 1% chance of happening in any given year. So Mary, I don't know if when you were communicating with the public, if that came up, or others, as you're thinking about how to communicate some of these risks, how does that play into kind of what we're doing? And
We did not try to define that for the public. It was more kind of behind the scenes discussions that were happening about it. And I don't know if we ever took a step back and did an analysis, of what happened. And I'm sure we had to do that to some extent for some of the FEMA grants that we had to apply for. But I would be curious to see. I guess I don't even exactly know what a 100-year flood is, now that you brought up that point of, is it just a 1 in 100 chance every year, or is it the other way that you talked about it? So it's hard to communicate with the public about those types of details when you're in the thick of it. I think information is fighting for acknowledgement, and you have to get out those most important things first. But I think that is a really good question for how that type of thing can be communicated to the public. I find myself doing that a lot, is taking, the technical aspects of something and trying to interpret it for the general public to make it easily understandable. And there's a lot of work to be done there for sure.
Yeah, we're currently working with this right now with a project down in Missouri with the Mark Twain National Forest, where we're looking at changes in 100-year flood events and then future projections. And we've shifted a lot to talking about percentages. So, 99th percentile or 95th percentile events. Or when we're talking about precipitation events, we often translate that into how many inches of precipitation are we actually talking about? So that can make it more real to people, like 2 inches in one day, so they can get a sense of what that's like. So I think saying it in a lot of different ways can resonate with different people. People who are really familiar with FEMA flood maps are familiar with 100-year and 500-year floods. So when you're talking with engineers, that's often the language that they're using. But when you're talking with the general public, you might want to use other language.
great, thank you. Megan, we have another question for you. So you talked about warming, but as this person's saying, understands it, we'll also see some unseasonable cooling events. Is there current research into how that might affect our region?
Yeah, there's that interesting thing about winter, right? So we're sort of losing those ideal skiing temperatures, and things are getting to be either too warm or too cold much of the time, right? And that's something that I haven't seen come up in the literature about tourism and outdoor rec impacts from climate change yet, but I do think it could be very important and relevant here. So I think it's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then another question is, agriculture and ag tourism is an important part of the regional tourism economy. Many of our local festivals are related to agricultural products. Are there any local efforts to identify possible impacts and strategies on this portion of the tourism sector?
So Kristen and I are part of the USDA climate hubs, and the Midwest Climate Hub does a lot of work on understanding the impacts of climate change to agriculture. We have been involved in developing an adaptation strategies menu specific to agriculture. So that's something that might fit in there. I don't know if you can think of anything else, Kristen, to mention.
No, I was thinking of the menu too. I do think it's a really interesting question, the confluence of ag and tourism though. So I think it would be really neat to get a project in working with one of the menus that was looking at both sides of those things, because I don't know that we've had a great example from this area yet.
That's really a fantastic idea, Kristen and Leslie. I think that's a great method of support. Or I'm working on a project that's putting together a survey on a very local scale, just with the Chequamegon Bay tourism and outdoor rec stakeholders to try to assess where they are with the experiences they've had from climate change and the efforts they're making to plan and adapt and what the challenges are. And definitely those agritourism businesses are big on our list of stakeholders that we're trying to reach out to and really find out what are the supports they need. So I'm glad to know about these resources that I can connect people with as we have those discussions.
Great, thank you so much. Oh, Mary, did you want to say
I
something?
was just going to say, we're just going to continue to promote all those great events. So hopefully the products will keep coming.
Yeah. Okay, well, it looks like we're at time. This went by way too fast, in my opinion. But I want to thank all of our speakers for your wonderful presentations and this excellent discussion, and everyone in the audience for your great questions. We're going to be taking a short break until 11:30 a.m. As a reminder, please visit exhibitor and sponsor booths, participate in the Wisconsin Water Week challenges, vote at the photo contest, etc. All of which you can find at EventMobi. And thank you so much, and we'll hope to see you at more events today. Thanks.